Hello and welcome to the Run Testers. My name's Nick and this is our first run review of the On Cloudmonster Hyper. So the Cloudmonster Hyper is a new shoe for On within the Cloudmonster line that is built to be the ultimate daily trainer according to On. It can be seen as the training partner shoe to the Cloudboom Echo 3. Definitely has some super trainery vibes with the materials used and also the price, which is exceptionally high. It's £210 in the UK, $220 in the US. Weighs in at 270 grams or 9.5 ounces in my UK size 9, which is a fair bit lighter than the Cloudmonster 2. It's got a 6mm drop from heel to toe, and the stack height is 37.5 at the heel and 31.5 at the forefoot. So that's actually a higher stack height than the standard Cloudmonster 2, but it's also a fair bit lighter. A lot of that's down to the fact that On is using its best material in the midsole here, which is the Helios HF foam, which is a Peba-based foam. So it's a dual density midsole with a big chunk of the Helios HF foam. I think it's mostly located under the forefoot, and then the other material used is On's classic CloudTech pods, which you can see at the back of the shoe here, which are a bit firmer and obviously a little bit less bouncy than the Peba foam you have in that big chunk under the forefoot there. You don't have a carbon speed board running through the shoe, unlike obviously the Cloudboom Echo 3, because this is a shoe built to be used every day, day in, day out, when you don't necessarily want that stiff carbon plate in there at all times. You have a lightweight woven mesh upper with a bit of padding around the back of the shoe and a very thin tongue there. Then you've got the kind of podded outsole design with the classic On groove, which is not as deep as on other shoes, but probably still deep enough to catch the odd stone, and then decent chunks of rubber on some of the pods, decent forefoot coverage, a few chunks at the back there. So their key impact areas on the shoe will be covered, so you should have decent grip and durability.
So when it came to fit, I ran in a UK 8.5, which is my regular running shoe size when I'm choosing On shoes. When I first put these shoes on the very first time, I found, immediately I could feel they were going to be roomy, and that's how I find them. I get pretty good lockdown across the top of the foot. I think those wrapping tongues that they've got really help with the lockdown. The heels hold nice and well and secure for me on that first run. The toe box is really roomy. That's the one thing. They have got quite a lot of length and there's quite a lot of room across the top of the toes. Big volume in the toe box, which I guess that's maybe a positive, maybe a negative, depending on what you like. I really quite like it. It's bordering on kind of feeling a little bit baggy and a little bit too roomy, but it's nice and spacious. If you're someone who goes for a more spacious Ultra, that kind of shoe, and you want a bit more room, then that's going to be good. But overall, I think I would recommend going true to size in these shoes.
So in terms of fit, I would say the Cloudmonster Hyper feels very Cloudmonster 2 in that respect. It feels very similar, I would say, in terms of the feel, particularly when you look at the front of this shoe, and it does kind of open up and it offers a lot of space, a lot of volume. In my UK size 8, that's what I had the Cloudmonster 2 in, and generally that's what size I would be in for On shoes. So I do think there is a lot of room, a lot of space there, a lot of wiggle room. Midfoot wise, again, very similar to the Cloudmonster 2 in terms of the hold that you're getting here. Not massively close or narrow, but definitely going to give you something pretty accommodating. Some similar level of padding, not overly excessive in terms of that heel padding at the heel collar. Tongue and laces, lockdown was generally fine. One thing I did note is the laces are quite long here, maybe unnecessarily long for me. A minor thing, but something I noticed. So yeah, I think my experience, very Cloudmonster 2 in terms of the fit here, very spacious up front of the toes. I think most people going true to size will be fine. There may be an argument to go half a size down if you prefer something a little bit more snug fitting, but I think in my size, it felt fine.
Comes to the fit of the shoe, it was all good for me in my normal running shoe size. I've got a UK 9 here, that's a US 9.5 with On, but a good amount of room in the front of the shoe, and a nice secure hold around the heel and midfoot. It's not quite as big and roomy as the Cloudmonster 2 was in the same size, I'd say. If you did find yourself swimming about in that shoe a little bit, you've got a slightly more dialed in fit with the Cloudmonster Hyper, and I'd say in general, stick to your normal running shoe size. Good morning, I'm just heading out to do my first run in the On Cloudmonster Hyper. Quite an exciting shoe, landed a little bit unexpectedly at the weekend. Quite excited to get out and do my first run in it today, which is just gonna be an hour, pretty relaxed, get used to the kind of the feel of the shoe. But it's billed as a big versatile all-rounder, so this is the kind of run that I hope you'll be able to handle quite well as being able to do some faster stuff down the line. I'm just doing an easy 60 minutes today after running a half marathon yesterday, so legs are pretty beat up. Hoping that nice big midsole stack with a mix of foams in there will protect the legs well and let me bounce through this run quite nicely. So let's get out and do it. So just back from the run, first one in the Cloudmonster Hyper. It was pretty good today. It's certainly a very comfortable shoe, and do think it fills that role it's talking about of that protective daily trainer that keeps the legs fresh with that Peba foam on top, and it has a little bit of bounce, not so much. Like I did a few little sections where I sped up a little bit, and it did feel quite good. Like it doesn't feel like it's really going to shift and be an all-out speed shoe, but I think there'll be some versatility there, certainly more so than shoes like the Cloudmonster 2, and generally it felt a lot better than the Cloudmonster 2 all round. I wasn't a huge fan of that shoe. I don't know, the pods on the bottom still feel like a weak point for the shoe. Like they don't create the nicest ground contact I find when I'm running in on shoes with that podded base and the slightly firmer feeling underfoot. They add an element of firmness and slappiness to the shoe that isn't really there with the nicer foam above that, which should probably feel even better still, I think, with a slightly better underneath to it. So I do think they take away a little bit of the enjoyment of the shoe. They're probably quite heavy as well. Like it's not the lightest shoe in the world, but I think it's fine the weight for what it is, but does mean it probably will lose out in terms of versatility to some other shoes that will have more of a speedy edge to them. But yeah, all round it felt okay today as a daily trainer with a little bit of super foam in there. You know, it was comfortable. It had a bit about it if you want to move a bit quicker. I think I'll enjoy running some slightly faster miles in it. Certainly feels like it'll be a nice protective workhorse shoe for long mileage. I think that'll definitely be a feather in its cap. Like today I'm on really tired legs and I felt really nice in the shoe cruising around in it. Whether that's all going to add up to what is a very high price tag for this shoe, I don't know. We'll talk more about that in the early verdicts in the full review, but yeah, pretty enjoyable first run in the shoe there. Still don't love the way the pods feel on the bottom of it compared to the foam above it.
So into that run test, and on the training schedule today was a 5 mile base run at kind of 8-minute mile pace. So that's what I went out and did, kind of dropped it down in places to kind of 740, 750 minute mile pace to kind of do some up tempo sections in the shoe, because ultimately this is a shoe, I think that On is kind of really kind of saying that you can do some faster stuff in this shoe and kind of take some pressure off maybe your race day shoe, the shoe you can really save for when you are kind of going out and doing kind of much quicker stuff. Now, first thing I would say, weight-wise, I'm glad that it is lighter than the Cloudmonster 2. So I think mine weighed in at 250 grams, so pushing it closer to that original Cloudmonster in terms of overall weight. Now, it isn't a shoe for me that kind of entirely disappeared. You still notice it is a little on the bulky side, bulkier than I would want from a shoe for slightly more up-tempo running. It is kind of sits in that kind of max cushion, kind of super trainer mold, I would say. But I think in terms of the shoes that sit in that profile that I've kind of run in, some I can, some I can't talk about, I think this still isn't one that absolutely disappears for me or feels the right side of kind of light for me in terms of a max cushion super trainer. Then you get into the midsole, and there are no kind of clear for me kind of speed focused elements for me, despite it having hyper in the name. I think, you know, you're getting Cloud Tech here, so it is definitely on the firmer side. There's less of it obviously than the Cloudmonster 2. There's none of that kind of softer kind of Cloud Tech phase in here either. So I think, you know, when I did drop it down in terms of that pace, I did find that there was a bit of life there, a bit of energy. It felt like it could handle that slightly more up tempo running, but I think in terms of all out speed and, you know, what I maybe would want to do in the shoe, I'm not sure that it felt like it was giving me that impression really, mainly because of that weight, mainly because I think the midsole still is a little too firm for me, or kind of that firmer approach from On that I've kind of hoped they were kind of moving away from. But ultimately for the Cloudmonster, they're kind of, I think, clearly sticking around with that kind of midsole. So for me, yeah, it was fine. I think when I kind of eased off, it was absolutely fine at that pace. I did feel the weight a little bit more. When I kind of picked the pace up, it felt okay. I think fine. I don't think it's a massively aggressive rocker in there. And as I said, I don't think there's a lot of quite clear speed-focused elements that kind of screams to me, this is a shoe that I'm going to want to do quicker sessions, maybe more up-tempo sessions, more so than the Cloudmonster 2, and more like the Cloudmonster. But ultimately, I don't think it massively moves away from the Cloudmonster at its core and being a shoe more in close kind of resemblance to the original Cloudmonster, less so the Cloudmonster 2, which I think if that's what you were looking for from the Cloudmonster 2, I think maybe getting a little bit more of it in the Hyper. But as a kind of all-out kind of speed-focused training shoe, I'm not sure it's quite there for me, based on that first run. It felt solid enough. I like the fact that it's lighter than the Cloudmonster 2, closer to the Cloudmonster, but I just think maybe there's something slightly missing for me so far. I'll say it's one run so far, only a 5 mile run. We'll be looking to see how it handles some shorter, much sharper stuff, and also maybe going longer in it as well. But yeah, a mixed first run, I would say, in the Cloudmonster Hyper.
So I'm just back from the first run. I did 10 Ks basically in an hour. So I was moving very easy pace, low heart rate for me, just ticking along really. As you might be able to hear it, I've got a little bit of a cold, so I didn't want to push it too hard. I don't really know what to make of these shoes initially when I first put them on. I got them out of the box. They're massive stack again, and we look like it's kind of, you know, they call it Cloudmonster Hyper, and that's exactly what I was thinking. You know, you've got really big midsole here, and you've got those, what looks like kind of very different parts in the forefoot to the heel. And I wasn't sure if those two were going to kind of play nice together when you started rolling. First put them on the foot in the house, they felt quite firm underneath. The midsole felt quite rigid and quite stiff. But once I got moving after a couple miles in these shoes, really, really surprising actually. There's a lot of energy to them. I found there was a decent amount of spring to them. The footbed landing is really quite soft, and that's really nice. There's a big sort of nice cushion to it. But it's almost like this kind of, you've got this sort of strange combination of like a cushioned landing, but there's a stiffness to the main outsole unit that returns, you know, quite quickly. It's quite a rigidity to it, but there's quite a lot of pop to them. And overall, I thought that made for really quite a nice, enjoyable, happy kind of cruising ride with a little bit of energy on them. They're not as kind of firm as going back to the old Cloudmonster. I think they're a better ride for the sort of firmness and the softness than we got from the new Cloudmonster. There's definitely that higher stack, but they don't feel unstable to me. They've got a nice wide platform. There's pretty good cradled landings that to me felt well protected. And yeah, I really enjoyed those miles actually. I clipped along really nicely in them. I can't remember what they are on the scales, but I didn't find them particularly heavy compared to some other shoes. You know, yeah, they are a bigger shoe in this kind of world where you're going to be talking about like Nimbuses and, you know, the New Balance 1080 V13 along with this. I didn't really find them particularly heavy on that run, even though I was feeling heavy myself. And overall the fit was good. I thought it was very comfortable on the foot. And I have to say, you know, on that first run, I've enjoyed this shoe. Yeah, so I didn't look at the specs before I went and ran in these the first time because I didn't have them. So I don't know what that stack is going to be, but what's going to be really interesting is to sort of understand how the engineering works, because it looks to me like that kind of forefoot section of foam is very different to what you're getting in the rear. It might not be. Certainly the clouds in the forefoot are shaped differently. There's, you know, you've got sort of the full clouds in the back, and then you've got these almost like half clouds in the front. What I will say basically on that first run is I think this was a comfortable shoe, a comfortable kind of cruising, easy shoe that was very easy to run in from the start. So first run verdict in the On Cloudmonster Hyper then. Obviously I haven't done many miles in them, 10Ks, an hour. It's not enough to really give a full verdict on a shoe. We'll want to do more testing. But my initial first impressions are that this is a nice, comfortable, easy cruising shoe with good softness but not overdone. It's not soft and over squidgy. It's got some kind of response to it. There's some sort of firmness to it. I found like it rolled along really nicely, and there's definitely a bit of energy to that midsole as well. I found there was quite a bit of bounce from what is essentially quite a big old stack now of this kind of the foam, whatever the foam is in there. I didn't have the texture, so I'm not sure if it's Helian. It does feel softer than some of the other Helian sort of midsoles that I've run in. Yeah, I mean, my initial sort of feeling you go to, is it going to be better than the Cloudmonster 2? I think absolutely yes. I think it's going to do that easy comfort cruising better than the Cloudmonster 2 and have more energy. It doesn't feel quite as sort of soft and sinky and a bit sort of flaccid like the Cloudmonster 2 did. How's it going to compare to the Cloud Eclipse? Maybe the Cloud Eclipse is going to be a bit more sort of rockered and responsive. I think, you know, looking back, it's definitely a bigger sort of softer shoe than something like the original Cloudmonster, which had kind of a lot of firmness to it. And I definitely think when I've been recently sort of running in the On Cloud Stratus, that to me just feels a bit ponderous and a bit heavy. This shoe is going to be a bit more lively than that. So I think it's going to strike a nice balance between being cushioned and protected, but also having a little bit of life to the midsole ride, which I think a lot of people are going to like. But I'm going to be very interested to do some more miles in it to see if that holds up under different conditions. But first run, yeah, with a cold, with heavy legs, heavy mind, it was exactly the kind of shoe that I needed today. So that was a tick for the On Cloudmonster Hyper.
So I'm back in the office. It's the morning after the first run in the On Cloudmonster Hyper, and Nick has just sent me the price of these shoes. I didn't have them yesterday when I was recording that and my initial verdict. I had no idea, no context of what the tech was, what the shoe was really aimed at, what it was supposed to do from On's perspective. They just told me it's going to cost you £210 or $219. I mean, that's an extraordinary amount of money for a daily trainer, and for me, I'm going to save my full verdict on whether or not I like this shoe as a running shoe until I've done more testing in it. But I can tell you now, it's not going to be worth £210. I don't care what it does. That is too much money for a daily trainer. If we're getting into the world where daily trainers are going to start costing us north of £200, then I think, yeah, we're all going to be a little bit in trouble. There are so many good running shoes that you can get for £60, £70 cheaper than that, yeah, I don't know. This is going to have to do something really, really special in order to warrant that kind of price. You know, that's close to what we sort of saw at the launch price of the new sort of Vaporfly Next Percent 2 race shoe back in the day. It's too much money on. Whatever happens with these shoes over the next few months when I'm testing them, that is too much money. And yeah, I just thought I'd say that.
Okay, some initial thoughts on the On Cloudmonster Hyper. Is that Feels like quite an interesting one. I'm kind of thinking, is Hyper the right name to associate with the shoe? This almost feels to me so far, and obviously I've only done one run in it, that this was the shoe that I thought the Cloudmonster 2 was going to be, and it feels maybe like a natural progression from the Cloudmonster. But in the same kind of token, I still feel like when On is talking about this maybe being a shoe that you can do faster sessions in, this is a shoe that screams faster sessions to me. I'm not entirely sure. And that's my kind of problem here. I think ultimately, I think that it is a cross between the Cloudmonster and the Cloudmonster 2, but does it give you enough in terms of that kind of quicker feel? I'm not sure so far based on that first run. Then you get into the price, and it is not cheap. It's not a cheap shoe. And I think there is a bit of a trend with these kind of max cushion super trainer shoes pushing the boundaries in terms of pricing. We saw it the Asics Super Blast. I think there are other shoes that are going to come maybe the next month or so that are going to do something similar in terms of that pricing realm. And there's an argument, should you be spending that amount of money when you could probably buy a couple of shoes that can cover those types of runs? I definitely think there's a bit of an argument here based on that first run with the Cloudmonster Hyper. I do feel like it feels nicer than the Cloudmonster 2, and I think that's a positive here. Is that enough of a positive to say that it should cost as much as it does? I'm not 100% sure, but I do think this is a nicer shoe than the Cloudmonster 2. I think more of what I thought it would be from the original Cloudmonster. The Hyper feels like that, but as a max cushion super trainer, I'm not seeing it quite yet in terms of my kind of first run with it. Maybe that will change over time, but right now it feels like an expensive max cushion super trainer that is not quite telling me that it is a shoe that I'm going to want to run speed sessions, and it's probably going to be a shoe that I'm probably going to log a lot of slightly more tempo running time in it, but ultimately is it going to be that one that I'm going to want to do quicker stuff? I'm going to grab for quicker stuff. I'm not entirely convinced just yet.
So it comes to the early verdict on the shoe. It says on the inside there, it says fresh legs and fast legs. And I think fresh legs is right. I think this is a shoe that will work very well for high mileage runners. It's going to give you a lot of protection. It's not the heaviest. It's fairly versatile and will give you a nice feeling underfoot and protect the legs so you are a bit fresher as you churn out those long runs. Fast legs, a little bit unconvinced by. I'll have to do some faster runs in the shoe to test that before our full review, but it feels a little bit big and bulky and not necessarily as sprightly as some other shoes out there if you are going to use it as a really versatile shoe that you do speed sessions in along with those easy runs. Compared to other On shoes, this is a much better shoe than the On Cloudmonster 2, which I just really wasn't a very big fan of at all. That was just a very dull ride, a heavy shoe, just a lot of stack, but not really a very nice feeling underfoot. Got far more enjoyable ride feel with the Cloudmonster Hyper, and it will be a lot more versatile with that more responsive Peba foam and the lighter design. On Cloud Eclipse is out there as well, which is a pretty versatile, very cushioned shoe as well, which has the kind of rocker Cloudtech phase design that On has, which I really do think is a strong design element of their shoes, and in the shoes it's been put in, I think it works really well. Obviously, they haven't gone for that with the Cloudmonster Hyper. At some point, I wonder if we're going to see a combination of the Cloudtech phase kind of rocker with the Peba foam, and maybe that will be producing the On shoe that everyone really wants. But for now, the Eclipse is a slightly different feeling shoe. I do like the rocker on that shoe, and after one run, I couldn't really say which I prefer of the two shoes when it comes to cushioned and versatile On shoes. Price is obviously a big talking point with this shoe. Obviously, even with the On markup, it's a very high price. Like On price shoes tend to be a little bit more expensive. Lots of people like them for casual use as well, but this is such an expensive shoe, and if you look at what you can get elsewhere for less, it's going to make this quite a hard sell, I'd say. Like, even the Asics Super Blast is cheaper, which is something, you know, I never thought I'd say given how expensive the Super Blast is. And that is very much the standard set for these big, high stack, plateless super trainers. It's a brilliant shoe, the Super Blast. It's lighter than this shoe. It's got a lot of bounce from that FF Turbo midsole. Not really sure after one run the Cloudmonster Hyper is really going to challenge that shoe in terms of all-round performance, and it's more expensive. So that's straight away quite a punchy thing to think about with the price. And then you've got a lot of cheaper shoes, whether you're looking for a plated super trainer like the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4, the Adidas Boston 12 with its energy rods, like really proven, versatile, very good all-round shoes. And if you're looking for a plateless all-round shoe, then the New Balance Rebel V4 and the Hoka Max 6 are a lot cheaper than this shoe. They're lighter, they deliver really good rides for everything. So I did enjoy the first run in the shoe, and it felt pretty good. I'm looking forward to doing some other runs in it and trying to get up to speed, but there are so many great shoes out there already that are so much cheaper than this shoe. And after one run, I'm not really sure the performance is going to be there to justify the very high price you have here. But anyway, do some more testing. Definitely check out the fast legs element of the shoe, whilst also hoping it keeps my fresh legs going. That's our first look at the On Cloudmonster Hyper. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Please do like, subscribe and ring the little bell. That's very helpful for us as a channel to keep growing, and we will see you next time.